All right, what is up, everybody? We are back for another episode of our weekly Wednesday live Q&A. And this week's topic, I actually left it open to the fans on what we were going to do. Once again, I'm live streaming on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm just getting everything squared away so everybody could see me. We'll let everybody roll in. But the past few weeks, I've had set topics. So I figured that I'd let it up to the fans. So they could just ask me whatever they wanted. I know I've been doing specific topics, so I figured this time around I just kind of leave it open-ended. So as always, I put out a status on my Facebook page roughly at 11 o'clock Central Time. Just people, they could ask me whatever. That's why I basically told them today. So we have kind of a variety of questions. Some very good ones, as always. My viewers always ask really good questions. And my boy Tommy, he's giving me a softball, hitting it off the tee for my first question of the day. So we'll dive right into it. We'll see who else tunes in here. And as always, please feel free to ask away as we're going here. And then we'll just get things going. So anyway, Tommy asked me, what shows am I getting ready for, dates and locations? So that was, once again, very easy question for me. Pretty much I know my whole year in regards to where I'm competing. So the first show that I'm doing this year is September 15th. That is the IPE Pro International, Kansas City. Second show I will be doing will be the Yorton Cup. That is in, I guess, technically Washington, D.C. The third show that I'll be, for sure doing, if I qualify, is IPE Worlds. I'm fairly certain I'll qualify for it. Then I might do some other NGA shows in the Midwest in the fall. They're obviously pro shows. But those are the big three right now. Those are probably going to be some of the three biggest shows that I could potentially compete in. I don't think there's really any bigger shows this year, and that was the goal. The goal was to see where I stack up in the pro lineup in the big shows. So that is the game plan for the year. I guess the date of the Yorton Cup, I did not say, is October 27th, and IPE Worlds is November 10th. Might be off on a day, on the exact day, but it's right around that time. Thomas is just cracking jokes here on Instagram. Anyway, let's go to the next real question here on my Facebook account, and we'll get to it. As always, Ben is asking solid questions, and Ben asked me, what are my views on training during contest prep? We often hear what builds muscle retains muscle, which is definitely true, but when it comes to stage and prep, where strength takes a hit, and you may need to switch it up. So that was a great question. Thank you, Ben. So you guys might have seen this answer, actually, in my most recent episode of Dominate Every Aspect. I did tell Ben that. He probably did rewatch it. But I'm going to go over it again. So, as I said this week, I did cover this in DEA, but my approach to training during prep remains really much the same as it does during the off season. And I'll get to what Ben's saying about strength loss here in a second. But in the off season, I trained 5 and 6 days a week. At the tail end of my off season, I switched over to a 6-day-a-week program. And I've been on a 6-day-a-week split here for over a year now. Nothing has changed since I started contest prep. When I began contest prep, I just kept on the exact same program that I was on before. Have a few things changed to that program? Yes. As I made a post today on Instagram, for those of you who decided, saw my post, I decided to rack pull instead of sumo deadlift, just because my glute was kind of bothering me. So I make slight changes like that to my plan according to what's going on. Now, what Ben is saying, And I'll tell you what I did last time, and I'll tell you what I'm not going to do this time. Last time during prep, I remember this vividly. And I was actually pretty strong, like, in my last contest prep. Not that I'm saying I'm weak now, but I just don't bench press. So what actually happened last time around was I actually like quit bench pressing because I couldn't bench press 225. Like, I just remember, like, I just felt like a weak bitch because I couldn't bench press 225 for sets of, like, 5 or whatever. So I just straight up quit bench pressing. Did that negatively affect me? Maybe, but this time around, I haven't benched in years. I actually get very, very poor activation out of my chest when it comes to bench press. So what Ben was getting at is, when strength starts to go, do you make changes to your plan? And the answer is yes. So a lot of you who have been following me a little bit closer know that I've been fighting like some lower back issues on and off for 8 months now or something like that. And I have to be very, very careful when it comes to my movement selection. So obviously, I'm not just going to do anything depending on the day. Now I will do specific movements every single time I go out. But I try to keep my main movers in. So, like, for instance, today, I did a handful of rowing movements. I did a handful of pulling movements. But my major mover of the day, so if that's the squat, I hack squat, I leg press, I regular barbell squat. So, I mean, those are like the big 3 that I do for legs. Like for deads or for back day, like I pull sumo off the ground, I pull conventional off the ground, and I do rack pulls. And on some days, like, I just don't do it at all if I'm like really, really feeling terrible. But that's just in regards to like my lower back injury and working around that, not necessarily my strength. I'm going to absolutely push it to the max, trying to hold on to my strength, because as Ben was saying, when I want to see exactly how Ben worded it, because I really liked it. He said, what builds muscle retains muscle. So the exact same movements that I did in my off season are the same ones that I'm going to do during contest prep. I'm not just going to magically change like my rep scheme up. I don't just lift heavy in the off season and then I only lift exclusively high rep during contest prep. And I feel like a lot of people do that. And that I lift at a variety of rep ranges. Now, I probably won't be pulling anything under 6 reps from here on out. Like, I just don't need to. I don't like to. My body doesn't respond to it well. So that's one thing that I probably won't be doing. But everything else, I'm gonna try to basically leave my training the same. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people just don't do. Is they try to change too many things in their training program when prep starts. All right, and I did have a question come in on Instagram here, and Thomas asked me, how do you decide what tan to use for a show? Great question, Thomas. I have always used Dream Tan number 2, red bronze. Now, if you get Dream Tan number 1, that is gold bronze, and you will look like a straight up golden statue. Now, those of you who, you guys know my profile pictures on Facebook and on Instagram, and my physique in there, I feel like that tan looks phenomenal. It catches the light. Yes, the tan is a little runny. Like, it doesn't, I shouldn't say runny, like it just doesn't set. It doesn't dry. So what's going on with that? It's like, it's an oil-based product. And it's not going to set up like anything else. So it's kind of hard, like for a first timer, you might freak out when you see it the first time, like, holy cow, like what is going on to me? But if you really like how it looks on other people, just take your time with it, apply it, and it'll turn out. Now, on the other spectrum, as far as like other tans go, like the competition tans, you got to realize that a lot of those are water-based, like the spray tans. So you have to be wary. When you start to sweat, you will sweat off a tan. Now, and Thomas is saying in terms of physique. Okay, so I guess that's what he's getting at. And then I'll get to Leanne's question here in a minute. Really, like, the leaner you, I feel, I don't know, Thomas, like, I feel like Dream Tan looks the best on just about anybody. I mean, bodybuilders, physique athletes, figure competitors, I even use Dream Tan. Like, the only time I really recommend any other tan besides Dream Tan would be for a bikini competitor. Yeah, Marie just asked Dream Tan for a figure competitor. I have used it, but what I actually do is apply like a base tan underneath. And Cody, I actually have a really good follow-up for you there. I've used a base tan for figure competitors underneath and then Dream Tan over the top. I mean, figure competitors, they could go both ways, but I've had really good success. And it's a very, very light coat of Dream Tan that I actually use with the figure competitor. So it's a base tan that's more of a water base, and then a light coat of Dream Tan. And then Cody said, taking Dream Tan, basically taking it off is a bitch. So Cody, here we go, man. This is a pro tip, man. Since Dream Tan is oil based, what it actually needs is another oil based product. So something like Dawn dish soap, or something actually I like to use is baby oil. In my last competition that I competed in, it came off instantly. I basically just walked offside, rubbed baby oil all over myself, and I was ghost white like I am right now in a matter of 2 minutes. Just took like a really crappy old towel with me, and it was fine. So Cody, that was a really good one for you to take Dream Tan off. I do want to get to Leanne's question here. How do you know what works for you to get real vascular and peeled? So with vascularity, I mean, comes you just have to lose body fat. Like, there's obviously things that you can control vascularity with, like just having enough water in you, obviously, having enough sodium in you, taking some kind of a pump product, having enough carbohydrates in you. So all those things can make you more vascular, but the biggest contributing factor to being, grainy or vascular or whatever, I mean, some is genetic, but a lot of it just has to do with overall leanness. So those are the major factors, but the biggest one is really just making sure that, you're lean enough to show off your vascularity. Because some people just aren't super vascular. I'm not one of those people who are super vascular. I mean, like my forearms or whatever are vascular, but nothing else on me is particularly vascular. Some guys have it, when they're in their peak of their off season, but I'm just not one of those guys. All right. Let's see some other comments rolling in here on Facebook. They're just talking about Dream Tan and all that kind of jazz. Anyway, let's move on to the real questions again. Got slightly sidetracked there, but we are back to business. Matt Jackson. I appreciate you, Matt, for asking questions. Matt's just trying to give me material, so I appreciate you, brother. He said, posing. All classes, how can make a huge difference going both ways? A great physique that can't pose or can, and the difference of physiques. So, hey, there's Matt. Matt is with us as always. So what Matt is getting at here is this, is that you could have a phenomenal physique and you practice little to none on posing, and you end up getting beat by someone that has a less impressive physique than you but knows how to pose. I've seen it happen multiple times. I've beat guys who have had better physiques than me, but I've posed better. I'm not necessarily the largest guy out there, as you guys may have saw on Instagram today, I weighed in at 180 pounds. And yeah, I'm getting lean, but in all reality, like, I'm going to be 170 pounds, 168 pounds on stage. So me personally, and this is like open bodybuilding, I need to be able to pose with the big boys. Like, if it's going to be one class, I might be giving up legitimately 30 pounds of muscle on some of these guys. 30 pounds of stage weight. Like, that's crazy to overcome. So me personally, I have to make sure my posing is 100% on point. Matt asked a follow-up question, is how far out do I start posing? Well, once again, I'm trying to document like my whole process, so I might be doing things a little bit differently, but I started posing like when I started dieting, more for like physique update purposes, just because like it's cool to see like your transformation go as the weeks go on. If anybody watches my YouTube videos, I appreciate you for tuning into those. So I pose weekly. But in reality, like when I'll actually legitimately start posing, I think this is one thing that people need to understand, is that you can't start posing 40 weeks out from a contest because you're not lean enough. Like, you need to have a certain level of leanness in order to know exactly where you need to be. For instance, like when you're trying to contract your glutes, like for male bodybuilders, I mean, I still don't have, I have glute striations a little bit from the side, but from the back, they're just not really visible. So if I was trying to find my setup point 20-some, 30-some weeks out from my show, it's not going to do me any good. So you have to be lean enough in order to find your angles and what looks best. Obviously, when you start getting a little bit leaner, you can start honing in. If I had to put a timeline on it, I would say at about the 16 to 12 week out mark, you should start posing regularly, multiple times a week, because the last thing that you need to do is be shaky on stage. And this is from a pro bodybuilding standpoint. I went to IPE Worlds last year. I was underwhelmed with the posing of the pro men bodybuilders. Some of them had phenomenal physiques, but they did not know how to present them well enough, and they got marked down for it. So, and that's from the pro level, guys. So what can you do as an amateur, if there's any amateurs tuned in, is that you could practice your posing, because especially at the amateur level, like that's where you can make up the biggest ground. Because let's be honest, guys, like amateurs, they have obviously less experience. They might not have competed before. So you can make up the most ground alone. And this is like muscle mass, this is leanness, by posing alone. You heard it first. Posing at the amateur level can take you the furthest. It could bump you up, and also it could bump you down the most positions if you don't do it correctly. So Matt, that was a great question, and he also asked how long to start posing for. Now, here's one thing. I will reference IPE Worlds again, since I was there in person. They were on stage for, I believe, 25 to 30 minutes. Now, once again, that is a class of 14 guys, money on the line, pro lineup. That is crazy amount of time to be on stage. So would I recommend starting off with 20 minutes of posing? No. Like, and for those of you who are competitive physique athletes or competitive bodybuilders, you know there's like a certain level of stamina that is involved when it comes to posing, right? Like when you start off, I mean, like 5 minutes is a lot. Like you're huffing and puffing. You go through one round of mandatories and you're like, whew, I'm beat. Think about that for a second. So if you're only used to posing for like 3 to 5 minutes, and what happens if you're in a pro lineup and they need you on stage for 25 minutes? Well, you're fucked. Like, you're not going to be able to last. So what I recommend is obviously adding time each week, adding the amount of days. It's not necessarily the amount of days. I would say it's the amount of time that you actually practice posing. So for instance, by the time September rolls around, November rolls around, I will probably start posing like more legitimately, more posing sessions, maybe tape the posing sessions so I could rewatch them. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to go 10 minutes, I'll go 15 minutes, I'll go 20 minutes, I'll go 30 minutes. And I'll probably, cap it at about 30 minutes. But that's what you need to do, especially at the pro level. Like, there's a lot going on that you need to focus on. And posing is probably the biggest contributing factor. Because let's be honest, guys, like, at the pro level, Like, a lot of guys are going to have really good physiques. They're going to have a lot of muscle mass. You know, their symmetry is going to be on point. Their leanness is going to be on point. I mean, sure, there's going to be slight differentiations in all those. But posing still varies the most. So that's, once again, where you can make up the most ground or you could get knocked down. Just keep that in mind next time you are going to compete. I did have a few questions roll in on Instagram again. So I do want to get to these as they come in. Then we'll get back to the ones on Facebook. Since I am, modern technology here, double streaming, double the viewers. Cody asked me, what are the views on the ANBF? I would say it's a smaller organization, more or less based out of the East Coast. They recently switched over to Wadas drug testing. I'm not necessarily a fan of the Wadas drug testing. I know why they did it. I mean, it's just a straight, no bullshit kind of a thing. When it comes to their drug testing standards. I personally wouldn't compete in the ANBF. I haven't had any clients compete in the ANBF. If you're on the East Coast, if you're looking for a smaller show, I just feel like it's not as well recognized as some of the bigger ones. OCB, NANBF are the two big ones in my opinion. NGA, those are kind of the big ones, in my opinion at least. Obviously, the ANBF is still a national organization. It just doesn't have the notoriety per se that some of these other ones carry. But yeah, if it's a local show for you and you're looking to get your feet wet, have at it. Leanna asked, when dieting down, I'm very vascular, but recently I regained body fat. Yep, and dieting down again, vascularity should be as prominent, right? Yeah, as you start to lose more body fat, vascularity will come back eventually. It's going to be a slow process. With me, like I said, I'm not necessarily the most vascular guy on the planet. And I've been noticing I'm getting more and more vascular, but I am down 14 pounds. So I'd hope that my vascularity is coming up a little bit. Let's get back to the questions that were asked on on Facebook now. Garrett asked, he said it's been a while since he's had a good question, but he finally came up with one. So he said, basically, when using an app like MyFitnessPal, more specifically when you're entering meat, he said example like chicken breast, there's a million different chicken breasts when you pull up MyFitnessPal, right? What is the best way of going about basically tracking that? For the set individual macros. So I actually answered this question earlier today in a private message, and I was kind of glad that Garrett asked it just because everybody, can tune in and hear what I have to say. But what I told Garrett is that really when I have a question, I actually go to the USDA and I look at what's listed for them. So for instance, if I get a top round steak, sometimes the labels are off. I just go to USDA top round, and that's what I log because I know that's a fact. The USDA has the set macronutrients for it, and that's it. And Tommy said barcode, but unfortunately barcodes don't always match up. So things like chicken, things like meat, I always go to USDA. The question that was asked earlier today was actually in regards to salmon, and once again, I always go online and double check because not everything always necessarily adds up. And I go off of the cut of the meat, not necessarily what's on the barcode. And yeah, Keith asked, yep, got to try using USDA. If you really want to take your time, you could go and look it up on the internet. I don't pull up Google necessarily all the time. I seriously just go on MyFitnessPal and Google USDA. It's probably a better way of doing it is actually going to the website because those are set macros. And the only problem with MyFitnessPal is that it's a lot of user entries. And that's where I found a lot of errors. And this is kind of a side note. If anybody, this might be able to help somebody. So who knows? But recently, like, we switched from Meijer to Aldi. Meijer, their barcodes scan exactly as they read on the box. You would sure think that a barcode would scan exactly like it would on the box. But for whatever reason, Aldi, when you scan it, it doesn't necessarily match up to what's on the box. And I thought that was kind of weird. It messed me up for a little bit, and then I caught myself like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, when it scans, it says, 23 grams of carbohydrates, when in reality the box says, 36 grams of carbohydrates. And I was like, whoa, like, what's going on here? So just always make sure that whatever you're adding, it does match the label at minimum. But in regards to things like meat, I always check USDA. So Garrett, great question. Thank you for that one. Now, Julie asked, and guys, I only have like 2 more questions here. So if anybody on Facebook or on Instagram has like legitimate questions for me, please feel free to ask and I will get to them. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping it up here shortly. Anyway, Julie asked, obviously it's never ideal to go over your macros when dieting. However, is there an occasion when it is okay to do so, and what should you eat? She said, for example, when she feels faint, dizzy, shaky, etc. I was like, damn, Julie's making me work tonight. She's hitting me with a hard one. So that was actually a really good question. And as always, like, there's always one question that like makes me think more than others in regards to like the questions that roll in. And this was the one this week. So Julie, thank you for asking this one. So first and foremost, I guess you have to look at why like you're feeling that way. Is it necessarily the food consumption? Is it your water consumption? Is it your sleep? Is it your sodium intake? Like, it could be really any of those things. Maybe why you're feeling that way. Obviously, like, blood sugar can get a little bit low and you might feel that way as well. I'm not encouraging people to go off of their diets. Obviously, being a coach, I would never want to encourage somebody just freeballing it and just going off of their plan. So what I will encourage, because you never can speak in absolutes, but what I will encourage is that if you are working with a coach, obviously you get a hold of them and you tell them how you're feeling. Hopefully they respond to you in a timely manner so you can figure things out. But if you are coaching yourself, for example, hopefully you're taking a lot of information in on yourself. And you could understand, you could look at like your weigh-ins for the past couple of days, past couple of weeks, and then you could see like, okay, has my weight been dropping a lot? Maybe I could eat a little bit more here and I could be okay. I don't particularly do that. This may sound a little harsh, and this is what I do for myself, and this is what I expect from my clients as well. When you are given set macronutrients, you hit them. I go to bed hungry some days. I'm kind of cranky throughout the day. Are there times right now where I'm feeling faint or dizzy? No. As if you guys saw my Instagram post today, I'm still eating plenty. I'm not at that point where I'm feeling faint or anything. But I always stick to my macronutrients pretty much no matter what. If you're coaching yourself, and you're a little bit more lenient with yourself than I am, you could eat a little bit more. But that's the tough thing about coaching yourself, and not necessarily working with a coach, is that you have to be very, very hard on yourself. So I hold myself to equal and or higher standards than I do my clients. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one putting the food in my mouth, and I know that I have set macros, and if I were to go over them, it might negatively affect my diet and everything. And granted, if you overeat on one set day, is that going to negatively affect you? But here's the thing, and this is what I wanted to get at, is let's say, for example, when you feel faint, you feel like that's the right for you to eat. Well, at the end of contest prep, you might feel a little dizzy, a little shaky or whatever every day. So is that encouraging you to overeat every single day? potentially. So you probably wouldn't want to do that. And I think this is where I've been kind of saying this all year, guys, is that your diet approach has a lot of effect on how you feel. So that's where like the diet breaks come into play. Obviously, like I hope people are taking diet breaks. I hope they're at least having like a weekly refeed. So hopefully you don't feel those negative repercussions. But to sum it all up, just in case some people kind of tuned in a little bit late into this one, is if you are feeling faint, dizzy, shaky, whatever, reach out to your coach first, see what they have to say. If you're coaching yourself, it's more of a self-reflection that you have to do based off of all the data that you're presented with. And it looks like Jacob is going to wrap up our questions here for the day. Jacob said, when it comes to the last month of dieting, what type of steps do you like to maximize nutrient intake? Have you taken the route of reverse dieting clients into a show? Then how do you set up peak week in that case? So let me just break this question down in pieces here, because Jacob asked a great question, like always, and I don't want to skip over anything. I want to stick to all the details. So, in a perfect world, I would like to reverse somebody into a show. Absolutely. So what I'm going to try to do tentatively this year is 2 weeks out from my show, my first show, I'm going to start bringing up my calories. Now, I haven't decided exactly how that is going to transfer into my peak week. Ideally, I might just build into that first show and see what happens. Because what happens when you actually reverse somebody into a show, obviously like you're feeding them, is they're going to fill out. So it's essentially almost like a very slow, controlled carb up. Hopefully we might be gaining a little bit of lean tissue in the process. So yeah, that is a tough question, but in the perfect scenario, what you would want to do is just build somebody into a show and then see how they respond to carbohydrates in regards to their peak. Now, the last month of dieting might be a little bit tough because you might need to push. And if you're in that scenario where you need to push, you can't be reversing into a show. So that's a separate issue. Maybe you need to pick another show, but ideally you would like to be able to reverse into your show. So let's go back with Jacob's other kind of follow-up. He said, do you have clients who reach better staying in a deficit going into a show or setting them up into a peak? So basically he said, if you just run them right into the show, is it better than, or do you see better results than reversing? So I would say, hands down, the people that reverse into the show will look better. And the people that you're just praying for your peak week to help them, not as much. And mainly, there's two reasons. I kind of mentioned them before. Is a slight muscle regain just from the increased food. More predominantly, more glycogen filling out. Over time, you might help with some performance there as well. So those are, and I gotta sneeze. Damn it! That was my first sneeze ever in a live video. That's how I know these videos are live. Anyway, I would much rather prefer somebody reverse into a show than just hoping for peak week. Let's see what else he had to say. Have you had anyone in the case supercompensate as a result of the carb up meals, and how did you deal with it? So Jacob is talking about spilling over potentially. So I get it. I get where he's coming from, and ideally, I would personally like to try someone's peak weeks before we hit the show, even if that's seeing how they respond to a high carb day, like at minimum. So I'll use one of my guys as an example. He's competing this weekend, so it's relevant. Last weekend, I gave him 2 back-to-back higher carb days. One was his like normal high carb day, so he was used to eating that amount. But then the second day, I hit him with like 100 more grams than that day itself. So on Monday, he sent me pictures. He was spilled over. In my opinion, he was looking a little bit watery. So I knew that, okay, like we can't go that high. How to overcome that? Well, we had time on our hands, obviously. Like we have a 6 days or 5 days until the show. So I mean, he just got back on like his low macros, his normal macros. He just drank some more water, pushed some cardio. But in regards to like dealing with a spill the day of the show, there's not a ton that you can do. There are a few tricks, but they might not necessarily work. So I'll give them to you. I'll give them to you, Jacob. Is that one, obviously, like push the water. If you wake up early enough in the morning, like you could take a diuretic as well. Obviously, like one that's legal. I'm not saying to take an illegal substance. Go in the sauna, try to sweat it out. If you don't already have your tan on. You could actually take a little bit of caffeine because that's a natural diuretic as well. But those are the big ones. Like, if you wake up at 7 o'clock on show day and you're going on stage at 10 o'clock, like, there's not a ton for you to do. So hopefully you get all that guesswork out of the way before that were to happen. If that were to happen, and this is really what you can do, is just learn from it. Take notes, what you did, and don't let it repeat again. That's about it, Jacob. I know that's probably not the answer that you're looking for. Obviously, there's a couple helpful tips in there, but when it comes to spilling over on show day itself, there's just not a lot you can do in order to correct that in just such a short amount of time. Unfortunately, like, time is just not on your side, and it's just not going to be your day. But as always, guys, I do appreciate everybody tuning in. So these will be replayed on my YouTube account. As always, but I do thank you guys for spending your Wednesday nights with me. So as always, guys, keep dominating every aspect. Have a good night.